Rohat Sharma was a man of few words. To the world, he seemed like just another librarian, quietly shuffling between shelves of dusty books in a dimly lit library. But there was something about him, something that hinted at a hidden depth, a reservoir of stories waiting to be told. He had an unassuming presence, the kind that made people overlook him. Yet, if you stopped to notice, his eyes told a different tale. They carried a spark, a quiet intensity that spoke of countless worlds hidden beneath the surface. Rohat's life followed a predictable rhythm. Every morning, he would unlock the library doors, straighten the chairs, and breathe in the familiar scent of old paper. His world revolved around books, but they weren't just pages and words to him. They were escape routes, portals to places he could only dream of visiting.
It wasn't always this way.
Rohat had once dreamed of being a writer, pouring his thoughts onto paper, crafting tales that would move people. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Responsibilities, failures, and a few dashed hopes had led him here, a custodian of stories, but never their creator. One quiet evening, as Rohat went about his routine, his fingers brushed against a peculiar book tucked away in a forgotten corner. Its cover was worn, its title faded, and it bore no author's name. Intrigued, he pulled it off the shelf and flipped through its pages. The words seemed to pulse with life, as if they were waiting for him. Something about the book felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. He felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that this was not just another forgotten manuscript. As he read the first few lines, Rohat was struck by a peculiar realization. The story felt personal. It was as if the book was speaking to him, reflecting fragments of his own life back at him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The protagonist's quiet struggles, the unspoken dreams, the weight of unfulfilled potential, all of it mirrored his own existence. Yet the story wasn't bleak. There was hope woven into its fabric, a glimmer of light amidst the shadows. The book posed an unspoken question to Rohat. What would you do if you could rewrite your story? He closed the book, his fingers lingering on its cover. The question lingered in his mind, refusing to let go. For years, he had buried his aspirations, telling himself that his dreams were impractical, childish even. But now, sitting alone in the library with the mysterious book in his hands, he began to wonder. What if the stories he had given up on still had a chance to be told? Rohat leaned back in his chair, staring at the book as if it held all the answers. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope, to dream, and to believe that perhaps it wasn't too late to start again. Rohat opened the book again, and as he began to read, the words seemed to transport him into another world. It was a small, vibrant village surrounded by lush green hills and fields. The air was alive with the sound of laughter, chatter, and the clanging of tools. At the heart of this village was a young boy named Arif. He was no older than 10, with untamed hair and a gaze that always seemed fixed on the skies. Arif wasn't like the other children. While they played games and helped their families, Arif spent his days sketching strange contraptions and collecting scraps of wood and cloth. Arif dreamed of flying. Not the kind of idle dreaming that fades with age, but a fierce, burning desire that consumed him. Every time he saw a bird take to the air, he felt a pang of longing. His small room was cluttered with his failed attempts, broken wooden wings, torn fabric, and crumpled sketches. The villagers didn't understand him. They called him strange, laughed at his obsession, and warned his parents that he was wasting his time. But Arif didn't care. He had a vision, and he was determined to make it a reality. One evening, Arif stood at the edge of the village with his latest creation, a glider made of bamboo, cloth, and boundless hope. He had spent weeks working on it, sneaking out at night to gather materials and perfect the design. The glider was crude, but to Arif, it was a masterpiece. He carried it to the tallest hill in the village, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Arif prepared himself for the leap. The villagers had gathered below, some out of curiosity, others to mock him. His parents were there too, their faces etched with worry. Arif stood on the edge, The glider strapped to his back and looked out at the vast expanse before him. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if he was just a foolish boy chasing an impossible dream? But then he looked at the sky, painted in hues of orange and pink, and felt a surge of courage. He took a deep breath and leaped. The world seemed to blur around him as he soared through the air. For a brief, glorious moment, he was flying. The wind rushed past his face, and he felt weightless, free. But the glider wasn't perfect, and gravity soon reclaimed him. Arav landed in a field below, shaken but unhurt. The villagers laughed, shaking their heads at what they saw as another failure.
But Arav didn't see it that way.
He had tasted flight, however fleeting, and it only fueled his determination. As he lay on the ground, staring up at the sky, he made a silent promise to himself. He would try again, and he wouldn't stop until he succeeded. Rohat closed the book for a moment, his thoughts drifting to a time long past. He hadn't thought about his younger self in years, the version of him who believed he could write stories that mattered. That version had been fearless, determined, and so sure that words could change the world. But life had worn him down. The rejection letters, the need for stability, and the slow erosion of confidence had made him pack away his dreams. He hadn't even realized how tightly he had locked them away until now, with this strange book stirring old emotions he thought were buried for good. He opened the book again, and another story began to unfold. This time it was about a woman named Mira. She was in her late 30s, living alone in a quiet town. Mira's world revolved around her small art studio, where she spent her days painting vivid landscapes. Her work was beautiful, but she painted only for herself, never showing her art to anyone. She had been a widow for 5 years, ever since her husband, Raj, had passed away unexpectedly. Since then, her life had been one of quiet routine, her grief wrapped tightly around her like a heavy coat. One rainy night, there was a knock on Mira's door. She opened it to find a young boy, no older than 10, standing there soaked to the bone. He looked up at her with wide, pleading eyes and said, "I think I know your husband." Mira was stunned. The boy introduced himself as Aman and claimed he had something important to tell her. Though skeptical, she let him in, offering him a towel and a warm drink. As they sat by the fire, Aman began to tell her things about Raj, little details, habits, and phrases that no one else could have known. At first, Mira thought the boy was playing a cruel trick. But the more he spoke, the more she realized he was telling the truth. Aman claimed to have met Raj in his dreams, where Raj had asked him to deliver a message. "Don't let the colors fade," he said, repeating Raj's words. Mira was overwhelmed, her grief and confusion colliding in a way she hadn't anticipated. She didn't know whether to believe the boy or dismiss him as a figment of her imagination. Over the next few days, Aman kept returning, and Mira found herself sharing stories about Raj she had never spoken aloud. She began painting again, this time with a fervor she hadn't felt in years. Her landscapes grew brighter, more vivid, as if the colors themselves carried the emotions she had buried. Aman's presence was a mystery, but it brought her a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. By the time the story ended, Mira had adopted Aman. She didn't need to understand how or why he had come into her life. All that mattered was that he had reminded her of the joy she had once known, the part of herself she thought she had lost forever. Rohat sat back, the book resting in his lap, and wondered how much of himself he had lost, and whether it was time to start finding it again. Rohat turned the final page of the mysterious book, his fingers trembling slightly. The last story was one of both endings and beginnings. It told of Arav and Mira, their paths unexpectedly crossing in a way that neither could have anticipated. Arav, now a young man, had finally built the glider of his dreams. His persistence had paid off, and his name was whispered in awe by villagers who once mocked him. But success came with its own challenges. Arav felt an emptiness creeping in, a sense that the thrill of proving himself wasn't enough. He longed for connection, for someone who understood the heart of his dream. Mira, on the other hand, had rebuilt her life. Her studio, once a place of isolation, was now filled with visitors drawn to her vibrant art. Amon had grown into a spirited teenager, helping Mira run workshops for children who dreamed of becoming artists. Yet, despite her contentment, Mira felt a quiet longing, an ache to leave something more lasting, something that would outlive her. Their meeting was serendipitous. Arav had heard of Mira's art from a passing traveler and decided to visit her studio. The moment he stepped inside, he was struck by her paintings. They weren't just landscapes, they were stories, vivid and alive, capturing emotions he had never seen expressed so clearly. Mira, noticing his fascination, struck up a conversation. What began as a casual exchange quickly deepened into something more. Arav spoke of flight, of freedom, of defying limits, while Mira shared her journey of rediscovery and the importance of embracing the unexpected. As they spent more time together, their worlds began to intertwine. Arav found himself inspired by Mira's art, sketching designs for gliders that could mimic the beauty of her painted skies. Mira, in turn, started painting images of flight, bold and daring, capturing the essence of Arav's dreams. Their collaboration became a celebration of possibility, a testament to the power of imagination and resilience. The story ended with Arav's greatest flight, this time witnessed by an audience not of doubters, but of believers. Mira and Amon stood among the crowd, cheering as Arav soared across the sky. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a shared moment, one that belonged to everyone who had dared to dream. As Rohat closed the book, he felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The stories were fragments of his own life, his buried dreams, his quiet struggles, and the potential he had once believed in. But they were also a reminder that it wasn't too late. The book, as strange and mysterious as it was, had shown him that stories weren't just about endings. They were about transformation, about finding the courage to rewrite the narrative even when it seemed like the final chapter had already been written. Rohat stood up, the book clutched tightly in his hands. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of inspiration. He wasn't sure where to begin, but he knew he had to start writing again. Not for fame or recognition, but for himself, to reclaim the part of him that had been lost. As he looked out at the rows of bookshelves surrounding him, he realized that every story was a new beginning, and it was time for him to create his own.